Sometimes the room feels wrong before anyone says anything. We've learned to recognize that shift on this channel the moment when grief turns into strategy and family becomes something transactional. Isla Carrington did not walk into her grandmother's memorial expecting a battle. She walked in expecting loss. What she found instead was paperwork. She was the granddaughter who stayed. That's what makes this story matter. The flowers were white. The chairs were spaced perfectly. Even the program had thick paper, like someone wanted it to feel expensive. My grandmother would have laughed at that. When the memorial ended, we didn't go to the house. We went to the conference room at Caldwell and Myers. That should have told me something. Mr. Henry Caldwell sat at the end of the table with a leather binder. My mother, Lillian, folded her hands like she was in church. Thomas leaned back, calm as ever. My sister Olivia checked her phone once before putting it face down. Henry cleared his throat. The Isla Carrington Revocable Living Trust governs the estate. There is an amendment dated 17 days prior to Mrs. Carrington's passing. 17 days. My grandmother had been in the hospital then. Henry continued. Under the amendment, Lillian and Thomas Carrington are named co-trustees. Control of Carrington Maritime Holdings will transfer to them, with operational authority delegated to Olivia Carrington, and to Isla Carrington, the trust leaves the property located at 62 Hawthorne Bluff. That was it. I blinked. The house. Henry adjusted his glasses. Yes. No mention of voting shares. No mention of the company. My mother leaned toward me. Your grandmother knew the house meant something to you, Thomas added. Governance is complex. Isla. It requires stability. Stability, I repeated. I worked in that company for 7 years. Olivia gave a small smile. You worked in marketing. I want to review the amendment, I said. Henry hesitated. We can schedule a review. Why not now? Thomas's tone sharpened. This isn't the time to make a scene. I stood up. She told me she trusted me. My mother's composure didn't move. Trust changes when facts change. What facts no one answered? I walked out. The house on Hawthorne Bluff. That's what they gave me. I realized then that they thought the house was a liability. It was a crumbling structure with a tax lien and moisture rot, a place meant to bankrupt my spirit and my bank account within 30 days. They hadn't left me what they loved. They had left me what they hoped would destroy me. Hawthorne Bluff smelled like damp wood and old salt. The lock stuck the first time I tried it. I had to shoulder the door open. Paint curled near the baseboards. The hallway light flickered once, then steadied like it wasn't sure it wanted to stay on. I stood there longer than I meant to. This was what they gave me. My phone buzzed. Harper, you're there. Yeah, and it's worse than I remember. I walked into the living room. The windows faced the water, but the glass had gone cloudy. A tarp covered part of the ceiling where rain must have pushed through. Harper exhaled. That house is on prime coastal land. If it's in that condition, they let it rot. I know. Isla, people don't let things like that rot by accident. I didn't answer right away. I ran my hand along the fireplace mantel. Dust coated my fingers. They transferred governance to Olivia without blinking. Harper continued, and they handed you a property that needs structural repair. It was sentimental, I muttered. No, it was strategic. I sank onto the edge of the couch frame. The cushions were gone, just wood and springs. They could have sold this years ago. They didn't. Exactly. Her tone shifted, quieter. Did you notice the amendment date 17 days before she died? While she was hospitalized? I closed my eyes. I remembered the medication schedule taped to the side of her bed. Harper's voice lowered. You need to contest the amendment. That means probate court. Yes. And accusing my own mother of undue influence. A pause. Isla. If the amendment stands, they control everything. As co-trustees, they owe fiduciary duties. But if they're the ones who manipulated it, that's breach of fiduciary duty from the start. I stood and walked into the kitchen. Cabinets half-hinged, a crack along the tile floor. They thought I'd sell it. I said, "Would you?" I looked around, the water view, the uneven floor, the silence. No. Harper didn't sound surprised. Then don't. The front window creaked in the wind. For a second, I imagined my mother standing there, watching, waiting for me to give up. I locked the door before I left, not because I trusted the hinges, because I wasn't ready for anyone else to walk in. The third weekend of repairs, I stopped pretending I knew what I was doing. There were contractor bags in the hallway, and the drywall in the den was half removed. Noah had spent the morning outside checking the drainage line near the foundation. Sam Morales stood in front of the fireplace with a flashlight between his teeth. "You need to see this," he called out. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. The brick along the back of the hearth looked off. One line did not match the others. The mortar was newer. Sam tapped it with the handle of his screwdriver. Hollow. That was not part of the original build. He muttered, "Can you remove it?" I asked. "Yeah, but if it is structural, we stop." It was not structural. 2 bricks came loose easier than they should have. Then a third. Behind the bricks was a narrow cavity. Sam leaned back. "That is intentional." Noah stepped in from the porch. "What is going on?" I crouched down and aimed my phone light inside. There was a box. Dark wood. Metal corners. Just solid. My pulse started climbing. "Don't touch it yet," I said. "I am calling Henry." Henry arrived within 40 minutes. He brought gloves, an evidence envelope, and a notepad. Discovery time, he asked calmly. 2:43 in the afternoon. I replied, "Present parties me, Noah, and Sam." He took photographs before anyone touched the box. The lock had rusted through years ago. When he lifted the lid, the air felt thinner. Inside were folders, bound ledgers, and a sealed envelope. We laid everything out on the dining room table. The top document was a notarized affidavit dated 8 months before she died. Henry adjusted his glasses and began reading. "Your parents have diverted funds from Carrington Maritime Holdings through layered entities for over 15 years. He stopped and looked at me. "Continue," I whispered. "The total amount siphoned exceeds $19,700,000. My ears rang. There were wire transfer confirmations and entity charts connecting Delaware companies to foreign accounts. "This is substantial," Henry said quietly. Further down. Her handwriting tightened. "They threatened to expose private family information regarding Isla's bloodline unless I corrected the trust." My chest went cold. "Bloodline?" Noah asked. The last paragraph was simple. "If the amendment dated 3 weeks prior to my passing is presented as voluntary." It was not. Henry closed the document. "They did not just move assets," he said. "They rewrote governance through pressure." I stared at the box. "They had not given me the house because it was sentimental. They gave it to me because they believed I would never find the proof of their $19,700,000 betrayal hidden behind the hearth." Henry didn't waste time. We met in his office the next morning. The chest was locked in his filing cabinet. Copies sat in front of us, clipped, labeled, organized. "If the assets were held in a revocable living trust," he began, tapping the affidavit. "This never goes to probate court unless someone forces it there, so I force it." I replied. He gave a small nod. "You file a petition to contest the trust amendment. Grounds undue influence, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty." Harper sat beside me with her laptop open, fingers already moving, and temporary removal of the co-trustees. She added quietly. Henry glanced at her. "Correct." I folded my hands on the table to keep them steady. "If we do this, they'll know I found it." "They already assume you did," Harper murmured without looking up. Henry leaned back in his chair. "Once this is filed in Fairfield County Probate Court, it becomes formal. They will respond aggressively. No surprise there. He studied me for a moment. This is not a family argument anymore. This is litigation. I swallowed. They threatened her over my bloodline, and that allegation is in a sworn affidavit, he replied, which changes the landscape. Harper rotated her screen toward us. I've started a public record search on Judge Whitaker's past rulings involving family trusts and campaign finance disclosures. Henry lifted an eyebrow. Stay focused. I am, she said calmly. I signed the engagement letter without rereading it. Henry gathered the documents. Once this is filed, there's no informal resolution. I nodded. File it. He didn't hesitate. They didn't respond to the petition with outrage. They responded with silence. 3 days after filing, my bank called. Ms. Carrington, we're conducting a routine review of certain transactions tied to your account. Temporary restriction pending verification. How long? Up to 72 hours. My contractor payroll clears tomorrow. A pause. We'll move as quickly as possible. The call ended before I could argue. Noah stood in the kitchen doorway, watching my face. What happened? They froze the account. For what reason? Routine review. He didn't laugh. That's not routine. By the afternoon, Sam called. I got something weird in the mail. What kind of weird notice of a lien? Says there's an outstanding contractor debt tied to Hawthorne Bluff. That's impossible. I know. But my insurance guy flagged it. He's asking if the project is financially unstable. I closed my eyes. It's not... Isla, if there's exposure, I need to know. There isn't. He hesitated. I'll keep working. But I had to ask. After I hung up, Harper texted. Olivia filed a response affidavit. I called her immediately. What did she say? That you're emotionally unstable? That you're weaponizing grief? That your allegations are retaliatory? I leaned against the counter. That tracks. She also implied you have a history of resentment toward family governance. I laughed once. It didn't feel like mine. That night, Noah insisted on staying at the house. You don't need to. I'm not leaving you here. We sat at the folding table in the half-finished dining room, one lamp plugged into an extension cord, wind tapping against the siding. You can still walk away, he said quietly, from the petition, from the war. I stared at the fireplace. The gap in the bricks had been sealed again, reinforced. They counted on that. Noah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then don't. Around midnight, headlights slowed outside the front window. A car idled longer than it needed to. Noah stood, walked to the door, watched until it moved on. The pressure wasn't loud. It was careful. And it was deliberate. Fairfield County Probate Court doesn't look dramatic. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a seal behind the bench. That's it. My mother wore gray. Thomas wore navy. Olivia didn't look at me. Judge Douglas Whitaker flipped through our filings like he was skimming a menu. Henry stood beside me. Harper sat one row back, notebook open, pen ready. Whitaker's voice was even. Ms. Carrington, you are contesting a trust amendment executed by your grandmother while she was competent and represented by counsel. Competent is exactly what we dispute. Henry replied calmly. We have a sworn affidavit alleging undue influence and coercion. Whitaker glanced down. Allegations are not findings. Henry handed up copies of the financial schedules. There are documented transfers totaling over $19,700,000 tied to entities controlled by the current co-trustees. My mother didn't move. Whitaker adjusted his glasses. Financial disputes belong in a different forum. They go to breach of fiduciary duty, Henry countered. The judge leaned back. Sentiment does not invalidate an amendment. Something inside me tightened. This isn't sentiment, I said, stepping forward before Henry could stop me. She was medicated. They threatened her. Whitaker looked directly at me for the first time. Ms. Carrington, you will address the court through counsel. They told her I wasn't worthy of the Carrington name. The room felt smaller. Whitaker's expression cooled. Personal grievances are not legal arguments. This isn't personal. It's fraud. My voice was louder than I intended. He set his pen down. That is enough. Thomas shifted slightly, just enough for me to notice. You're protecting them. I said. You're dismissing evidence without review. Whitaker's tone sharpened. You are out of order. You know what they did. A pause. Stillness. Ms. Carrington, he said evenly. You are in contempt of court. The word hit harder than I expected. Bailiff. The bailiff stepped toward me. Noah rose from the back row. This is excessive, Noah protested. Sit down, the bailiff instructed. Cold metal closed around my wrists. Harper's pen dropped to the floor. I looked at my mother. She didn't flinch. Whitaker reached for his gavel and the courtroom doors opened. The doors did not slam. They opened quietly, admitting a sharp draft of conditioned air. 2 men in dark suits stepped inside, led by a tall, silver-haired man with an aura of unshakable authority. Behind them, a United States Marshal closed the door and stood guard. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from a family dispute to a federal crime scene. Judge Douglas Whitaker froze, his gavel still suspended in mid-air. The leading man walked straight down the center aisle, his eyes locked on the bench. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. Judge Douglas Whitaker, he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. He held up a gold-sealed document. We have a federal arrest warrant issued by the United States District Court for the District of Connecticut. Silence fell like a physical weight. Whitaker blinked once, his composure fracturing. This is highly irregular, he stammered. The marshal moved closer to the bench. Sir, you need to stand. On what basis? Whitaker's voice thinned to a reed. The lead agent did not raise his voice. Public corruption, bribery, obstruction of justice. I felt the cold metal around my wrists become very real. Across the aisle, my mother finally moved. Just slightly. Thomas leaned toward her, whispering something too low to catch, his face a mask of sudden, sharp panic. You have no jurisdiction over this proceeding, Whitaker claimed, though his trembling hands suggested otherwise. The marshal repeated, firmer this time. Stand up, sir. The bailiff looked between them, uncertain and caught in the middle of a power struggle he could not win. The lead agent turned his steady gaze toward him. Release her! The bailiff hesitated. Now! The agent commanded. The cuffs unlocked with a sharp, echoing click. My wrists burned as blood rushed back into my hands. Noah was already beside me, gripping my elbow to keep me steady. Whitaker stood slowly, his robes suddenly looking like a costume. This is outrageous! The agent stepped closer to the bench, placing a folder on the wood. Your communications with Carrington Maritime Holdings and related shell entities have been under federal investigation for 14 months. Today's ruling against the petitioner completes the pattern of racketeering we have documented. Thomas's jaw tightened. For the first time in my life, I saw my father look vulnerable. The marshal guided the judge away from the bench. No shouting, no drama. Just the quiet, heavy weight of federal authority. The courtroom felt smaller without him there. The silver-haired agent turned toward me. Ms. Carrington. My throat was dry. Yes, you are not under arrest, he said. A faint shift appeared at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, but a recognition. You will be contacted regarding the federal proceedings against the trustees of Carrington Maritime. For now, you are free to go. I watched my mother and Thomas exit through the side door, shadowed by agents. For the first time since the amendment was read, they did not look like the ones in control. The federal agent asked to speak with me privately. We stepped into a smaller conference room down the hall, where the fluorescent lights buzzed with a faint, irritating hum. Noah stayed near the door, a silent anchor in the shifting tide of the afternoon. The man who had orchestrated the arrest closed the leather folder in his hands. My name is Agent Samuel Rowe, he said, his voice dropping an octave from his courtroom persona. You have been investigating them, I said, more a statement than a question. Yes, for over 1 year. I let that settle. This was never just about my petition. No, Rowe replied. Your petition intersected with a larger racketeering investigation. Carrington Maritime has been flagged for wire transfers tied to shell entities. The judge's involvement was the missing piece. He paused, looking at my bruised wrists. The contempt charge accelerated the exposure. It forced his hand. Rowe shifted, and the professional mask softened. There is another matter you need to understand. Isla, this is not purely institutional. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My mother told me my biological father disappeared before I was born. Rowe nodded slowly. That is not entirely accurate. Eleanor Carrington and I had a relationship decades ago. It was brief and complicated, but the result was certain. Your mother, Lillian, is my daughter. The room went impossibly still. So you are saying, I whispered, that you are my grandfather. Yes. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Thomas had known. He obtained documentation years ago. Rowe continued. He used it to pressure your grandmother. He claimed that the legacy would be destabilized if it became public that you were not a direct Carrington descendant through his bloodline. He told her I was not worthy. I said. Rowe did not soften the blow. Yes. We conducted a DNA comparison using preserved biological material from Eleanor's personal effects. The probability of grandparent lineage is 99.98%. I stared at the wood grain of the table. My mother had known. She had let Thomas use my own identity as a weapon to strip me of my inheritance. They had not just tried to control the company, they had tried to delete the truth of who I was. The indictments did not come all at once. They came in waves. First, Carrington Maritime Holdings was placed into federal receivership. An independent court-appointed receiver stepped in to preserve assets while the investigation moved forward. Board authority was suspended, accounts were reviewed, and every transfer was traced back 15 years. Then came the formal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Lillian did not call me. Thomas tried once, but I let it go to voicemail. Henry met me in his office the week after the receivership order. The probate court is reconsidering your petition in light of the federal findings, he explained. The trust amendment is vulnerable now, because of the coercion. I said, yes. And because co-trustees have fiduciary duties, those duties were breached. Henry looked at the files spread across his desk. The court will not leave control with individuals facing federal indictment tied to trust assets. Their removal is likely permanent. I nodded slowly. The house on Hawthorne Bluff was almost finished by then. One evening, my mother requested a meeting through counsel. We met in a neutral office with glass walls. She looked smaller without the high bench of the courtroom to protect her. You think this is justice? She began. I think it's consequence. You do not understand what it takes to protect something that size. She snapped. I understand what it takes to protect myself. Her jaw tightened. Thomas handled the structure. I handled perception. You handled pressure. I corrected. He told her my blood would destabilize the legacy. And you let him use it. Silence followed. You are dismantling everything, she added quietly. I am restructuring it. Within months, the original trust provisions were reinstated, the amendment was invalidated, and the trustees were removed. Control returned to me, but I did not take the company the way Thomas would have. Instead, I authorized a phased employee ownership transition for the operating arm of Carrington Maritime. We would stabilize first, then share equity over time to reduce concentrated control. Henry looked surprised when I signed the directive. You are certain? Yes. Control does not always look like holding everything. Sometimes it looks like choosing differently. The house doesn't creak the way it used to. The floors are steady now. The windows seal tight against the wind. The fireplace brick is rebuilt, clean, solid. If you didn't know what had been hidden there, you'd never guess. Some nights I still walk through the rooms after everyone leaves. Noah usually stays up late in the kitchen, finishing emails, pretending he's not keeping an eye on me. "You okay?" he'll ask quietly. "Yeah." And most nights, I mean it. The company runs differently now. Slower, transparent, boring in a way that feels healthy. Employees sit at the table during meetings. Ownership is spread out over time. No one person holds the whole thing. My mother took a plea agreement. Thomas is still fighting. Olivia moved out of state. I don't follow the updates closely. Last week, I stood on the back porch with Agent Rowe, my grandfather. "The word still feels new." "She would have liked this," he said, looking out at the water. "I think she would have liked the quiet," I replied. He nodded. "When I think about what changed, it isn't the company or the trust or even the name. It's that I stopped trying to earn space in a room that never wanted me there. Isla Carrington isn't the version they tried to correct. I'm the one who stayed. The one who looked at the documents. The one who didn't sell the house. And this house doesn't feel like evidence anymore. It feels like mine. If this story stayed with you in some way, you already know why it mattered. We carry it quietly from here."